Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Today, we're going to be looking at House of History. This is the Catilinarian Conspiracy, otherwise known as the Second Catiline Conspiracy, is what I believe. I saw when I was doing some research. This is the Battle of Pistoria. This hopefully will encompass some of the context and lore of the Catilinarian Conspiracy and not just the battle. But if it does just the battle, we're fine over here. Thank you for being here. Let's jump right in.
It is January 62 BC, some 20 years since Sulla's civil wars. Roman Italy is again in conflict with itself.
Who would have thought?
Up and down the peninsula, forces gather to overthrow the Republic. Rebellions break out in Apulia, Bruttium, Cisalpine Gaul, and even across the Adriatic Sea in Greece. The main uprising, however, is near Faesulae and modern Pisa in northern Italy. Here, near the city of Pistoria, two armies prepare for battle in a snow-swept valley. One army is led by the infamous and capable rebel general Lucius Sergius Catilina. An old friend, Gaius Antonius Hybrida, leads the other. One general is determined to bring his family back to honor, and the other to satiate his base political appetites. Catiline holds out hope that Hybrida will join his force. A Hybrida, perhaps uncertain of who will win, or in an attempt to guarantee his station, has claimed illness and temporarily surrendered command of the consular army to Marcus Petreius, his lieutenant. Catiline's forces are outnumbered, but are primarily a well-armed and determined veteran force. The loyalist forces are likely less experienced and similarly armed, but are unable to use their superior numbers properly due to the terrain, and they may even doubt the loyalty of their absentee general. Catiline, unlike Hybrida, has no doubts. As the battle closes in, he prepares an active defense, dismounts his cavalry, and sends the horses away. He will have no use of a steed. Today he plans to find either victory or death.
Okay, so that's the setup. Don't really have too much context yet. Besides, Catiline wants to bring back honor to his family, his rightful standing. Petreius is the step in, given the sickness of his contemporary. So, okay. No cavalry here, just all infantry.
Lucius Sergius Catilina, or Catiline, was born in either 106 or 108 BC to the gens Sergia, a patrician family that once held the highest offices of the Republic. While their glory had waned...
I really need to look up the gens, which is basically just like the branches of different families. I need to look up like the gens of Rome in terms of like the classism that divides the gens.
Significantly over the past 280 years, their finances had not. We know this as Catiline always met the property requirements to be a senator, an impressive feat given the wars and debt crises of the late Republic. Like many in his day, age, and station, conflict would shape and define his life. He was a child at the start of the Social War, participated in the siege of Asculum, attached himself to Sulla's forces during the civil wars, and resided in Italy during Spartacus's well-known slave revolt that tore the peninsula apart.
That's one thing we really haven't looked at is the Spartacus slave revolts, which I know Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey all kind of like are there during that time. Pretty sure, or at least from the TV show.
These repeated civil wars are hypothesized to have caused enough uncertainty that those in Rome with wealth began to hoard it instead of spending it, thereby limiting the physically available cash. Having items of value but no money to exchange them for, debtors began to offer other forms of payment, that is in slaves, land, or real estate. This was not the form of repayment that creditors had agreed to, however, and they declined these offers, thus preventing debt resolution and putting the debtor at risk of losing the protections otherwise guaranteed to a Roman citizen. Modern scholars such as Adalberto Giovannini, a specialist in ancient economics, claim that this crisis directly or indirectly affected all classes in the late Roman Republic. Clearly, reform of some sort was needed. Using his connections, wealth, and name, Catiline rose rapidly in the Roman political system, and for a time it appeared the young nobleman might return his long-forgotten family to honor. But this is when a series of roadblocks would appear on Catiline's road to power. He was accused of corruption, making him ineligible for the consulship of 65 BC, and he would lose the election for it in 64 BC.
What was his corruption on?
Frustrated that a man of patrician birth would be denied an office he saw as his birthright, he took
Birthright? What are you, a king?
his populist politics to the extreme. Declaring that he would reduce or forgive debts and redistribute land, he ran for consul again. This new populist platform made him a threat to Cicero.
Yeah, Cicero wins in 63, so I guess that's his adversary.
His power base was primarily that of wealthy equities and landed senators, both groups who were regularly creditors. Following a massive smear campaign where he was accused of attempting to assassinate Cicero, Catiline lost again.
Dang.
It now seemed like the Sergia family, which Catiline so proudly represented, may be permanently stuck in the political wilderness. Scorned by the Senate and possibly now bankrupt, Catiline seems to have internalized these slights as a feeling of hate, revenge, and revolt. On the night of October 19, 63 BC, the future triumvir Marcus Licinius Crassus hurriedly awoke one of the consuls for the year, Marcus Tullius Cicero, with an urgent message. Someone planned an impending massacre of prominent citizens and senators to occur in just 9 days.
That is the start of the conspiracy, I guess.
Cicero relayed this information to a skeptical and divided Senate and, in his speech, denounced Catiline as the instigator of a large conspiracy in such terms that all senators present slowly distanced themselves from the populist.
There's a very famous, I wouldn't say very famous, but there's a famous painting depicting that I was looking at, where Cicero's got like, whatever, like the speech out and is like the theater of senators.
Leaving him alone physically and politically. Due to a lack of evidence, nothing was yet done, but the presence of an army gathering in Etruria seems to have confirmed Cicero's claims. An attempt against the state was about to be made. Cicero would continue to denounce Catiline in the days following, and on November 9, 63 BC, Catiline fled Rome while declaring to the Senate that he would enter exile. Instead of exile, he joined with the gathering forces near Faesulae, to the west of the Apennine Mountains. Meanwhile, some Catilinarian allies left behind in Rome attempted to recruit a Gallic tribe, the Allobroges, to their side. The Allobroges' leaders were in Rome to air grievances to the Senate and could have proven a persistent ally for the Catilinarians. Instead, they tried to get on the Senate's good side and betrayed the rebels. Events were moving fast now. The Senatus Consultum Ultimum was passed,
Final act?
giving Cicero the power to deal with the forming coup d'etat
Yeah.
by any means necessary.
He's dictator.
The Senate did not know this yet, but armed forces gathered down the length of the Italian peninsula. In the
Dang. Is this like, almost like a... Is this actually connected to Catiline? Or is this like opportunistic individuals?
south, Bruttium and Apulia were beset by servile rebels. In the east, the Paeligni took arms. In the north, Picenum and Etruria rose in revolt as well. The spread of the rebellion was now a serious threat to the Republic's stability. Time would tell if Rome would slip. Upon meeting up with his army in the north, Catiline declared himself consul and raised his standard, an old Marian eagle. Sulani veterans from the local colony and nearby bandits signed on with the rebels in droves. Primary sources indicate that at this time Catiline's force numbered 10 to 20,000.
Those are some bogus numbers. I mean, you ain't gonna take down the whole republic with 20,000. It's a good start. I will say it's a good start. It's just there's not enough men.
But about a quarter were properly armed.
And I know I'm pausing a lot, but I know there's probably, if we that number's so much bigger when we count all the other rebels in the other parts of Italia. I know. I know.
Interestingly enough, perhaps due to Senate gridlock, there happens to have been two separate armies waiting outside Rome for triumphs from separate eastern campaigns. All of these men,
The Mithridates? Gotta be them.
by definition, were experienced soldiers, though they probably hadn't faced Romans before, and the exact count is unknown. They seem to have constituted a fairly large force, with some sources describing them as consular armies. In addition to these legions, the Senate raised emergency levies of uncertain disposition to fill the ranks. The Senate appointed Antonius Hybrida to lead this army and sent him north from Rome to track down Catiline. Another army was sent under Metellus Sala towards Picenum to put down Catilinarians there. Hoping to crush the smaller revolts before they could grow, further loyalist forces were deployed up and down the boot of Italy. Most of these troops were the emergency levies aforementioned, and wouldn't be relied upon to hold their ground against Catiline himself. After defeating the Piscine rebellion, Metellus Sala seems to have moved southwest towards Catiline. At the same time, Antonius Hybrida half-heartedly chased Catiline along the Via Cassia to the area surrounding Faesulae. Catiline and his army soon heard that their plot in Rome had failed, resulting in the unreliable elements within his army deserting. These mass desertions left him with just over 3,000 men, mainly consisting of veterans of past civil wars who had spilled Roman blood, were almost as well equipped as the proper legions, and were ready
This guy is in trouble.
for a contest of arms.
This guy's in trouble.
Following evasive maneuvers across the Apennines during a series of forced marches, Catiline's diminished force was now between two armies in the middle of January, and food was short. Metellus Sala was rapidly approaching from the north with a small force, and Antonius Hybrida approached from the south. Catiline realized that his army would starve without removing one of these threats. To this end, he may have hoped that his friend Hybrida would defect with his army instead of fighting, and chose to face Hybrida's larger force in a narrow valley that some say is modern Campo Tesoro. Claiming illness, and perhaps due to political concerns, or for the sake of friendship, Hybrida surrendered his command not to Catiline, but to his lieutenant, Marcus Petreius. Would the loyalists have their morale affected by their absentee general, or would the rebel army shatter? On this cold January day near Pistoria, it became clear that the Roman gladius would once again spill Roman blood.
Here we go.
Due to the mountainous terrain to Catiline's left, and a boulder-strewn field on his right, neither he nor Petreius would use their cavalry. Catiline chose to send his horses away instead, as a reminder to his men that flight was not an option, but that this road must be opened with steel, as Sallust puts it.
Is that why he did it, or did he do it because he knew the cavalry in this tight area would not be as efficient?
Catiline could always replace the steed. He didn't plan to replace his army. Astraddle the valley were 8 well-armed rebel cohorts in line with picked men in the front ranks, helmed by the centurion Gaius Manlius on the right. The Catilinarian left flank was well protected by the base of some mountains, resulting in a robust defensive position that would prevent the loyalists from outflanking the rebels using superior numbers. Catiline placed himself under the Eagle standard in the rear, alongside freedman bodyguards and his limited reserves. Meanwhile, the loyalist legions numbered around 2 or 3 times the size of Catiline's force, but were better supplied and maybe better equipped.
Yeah, it's not going to end well for Catiline here.
Owing to the limits of the valley, Petreius had little choice but to mirror the length of Catiline's line, but planned on punching through the rebel line using sheer numbers. He could afford army losses, while Catiline couldn't. To support this push, the loyalist general placed his Praetorians, the precursors of the later imperial Praetorians, in the center of the rear ranks. Along the far flanks, and presumably dealing with uneven terrain, were the Ferentarii, a type of skirmisher armed with either javelins or darts, which may have bore little to no armor to assist their speed and maneuverability. Following the suspiciously timed onset of Hybrida's illness, horns echoed from both armies, signaling a slow and almost cautious approach toward each other. That is until they entered into skirmishing range, at which point both sides dropped their javelins and charged. The lines clashed with a chorus of shouts, and the greater loyalist force pushed with body and shield into the rebel line.
I can tell this is a newer House of History video. It's very advanced.
Catiline led an active defense, personally deployed his reserves to any gaps appearing in his ranks, and often came directly to blows with the enemy himself. In this way, he held the loyalist tidal wave at bay. Petreius had expected a quick victory against the rebels, but Catiline's men knew their diminished forces could only hope to survive this day through victory. The loyalists, having cornered a beast, had other options. Despite the seemingly hopeless situation, we are told that Catiline and his legions fought fiercely. The rebel line had begun to diminish from the ongoing brawl when Petreius called upon his praetorians and personally led the charge. Following this thrust, men died where they stood and did not falter. Praetorians cut into the rebels like a cleaver into meat. Casualties mounted first in the middle, then the flanks, not due to rout as in most battles, but due to massive loss of life. After running out of reserves, Catiline suffered a breakthrough in the center, allowing the Praetorians to face his exposed and now partially enveloped flanks. And yet they didn't run. Catiline could no longer hope to win this battle, so he rallied his bodyguard for one last push.
It's a Roman death, it shall be.
The force of the renewed rebel onslaught began to press deep into loyalist lines and killed many, but it wasn't enough. The rebels stood, they fought, and they died to a man. The wounded were cut down without mercy. Gaius Manlius had died with his men, and Catiline was found amongst the bodies, ragged with breath, and was decapitated. Sallust tells us the atmosphere following the battle was a mix of sorrow and joy. Here lay a friend, there a relation, and nearby a personal enemy. Primary sources stress that this was a costly victory, for all forces fully committed to battle on the Republic's side had become casualties due to wounds or the embrace of death.
Wow. I know we're gonna probably have like um a conclusion on this video, but that is just swift. That was a swift battle.
Hybrida, miraculously healed now that the perils of war had passed, had Catiline's head sent to Rome alongside news of the victory. Following the Battle of Pistoria and the defeat of the main Catilinarian force, one may expect that the rest of the rebels would dissolve. Still, many stayed at arms for years following Catiline's death.
Well, maybe it's kind of like the social war where there's variables to this conflict and opportunistic people versus just hardliners, you know.
With a rebellion in Bruttium only being resolved in 60 BC by the father of Augustus, one Gaius Octavius.
That's crazy.
All remnants would be defeated in their turn. But these events were not auspicious for the Republic's health. Even within the Roman power structure, men were now regularly betraying it for the sake of personal gain or revolution. Catiline served as a lesson for those who would imitate Sulla. He had tried to rally dispersed forces to himself, while Sulla and the future Caesar would take command of armies already in the field, a course of action which Octavian and the later Vespasian would use. Similarly, the debt crisis that Catiline's platform sought to resolve would fester in the Republic's wounds until the time of Augustus. The Allobroges likewise remained discontent with their treatment by the Senate and would take up armed conflict against Rome repeatedly in the following decades. While fortune didn't favor Catiline, it did, however, favor the Surgegens, who would attain the consulship around 70 AD, some 450 years after their previous one, a fact that surely would have pleased Catiline.
Wow. Very interesting video. I loved it, by the way. Amazing, like I said, more advanced versions of the House of History videos, mostly probably newer. Uh so the Catilinarian conspiracy, the second Catiline conspiracy, evolved from this financial crisis to a one person of Catiline really thinking that he deserved consulship and he was blackballed, and most of the Romans would go into exile and they would chill for a little bit. It might come back sometimes, but it seems that in this case they were more or less utilizing this as an opportunistic moment to seize what maybe the people in the past who created this precedent of upheaval, trying to gain respect that way. Next, we're going to talk about in the Roman Republic. We've already done a lot of the Gallic Wars, Caesar. So the next videos we're going to start is the Kings and Generals Civil War for Caesar versus Pompey, which is going to be a behemoth of a series. So stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Till next time, peace out. Bye bye.